let us begging virkelig, as if you are walking down a misty Dublin street in the 1840s. The air is heavy with dampness, carrying the fine smell of smoke, river water, and some messing for less pleasant, the so tratsai tat come with hunger and neglect. The toblestones beneas jo fedare slidge with Rhine, worn smalls betosens of steps, yet cracked in platzes, shoving of dead city like its purple, bears stars to cannot erschile behidden. It is the time of famine, a time the streets are not filled with the livelle bustle on a mixed experts in a current capital, but instead with hushed voices, very footsteps and faces holoved bevand. Dublin, tokspar devos devastation of the zontruside faire potatoes failet in the fields, has some a gathering point for desperation. Men, women and children drift into the cities aching food, shelter, or some fine glimmer of hope. Instead, they often find crowded lanes, harity soap kitchens, and the salt indifferency of officials. You might imagine yourself standing at the edge of one of Tessenar of lanes. The boilingsrisse closet together, Britsk statsker open Britsk, the windows streaked with sort antrein water. Laundry hangs limply atros lines, but many of the garments are ragged, barely holding together. The sound half-tugging horse from Bechintin walls. The rasp of illness spreading through the verkennet. The famine was not just about hunger. It was also about disease, about the verkennet bodies betzame as he pray for cholera and typhus. If you wandered up into the streets, you see children barefoot on David stones, they toes red with salt, they clothing, if they have an at all, hangs lose, hand-me-down straps theatre devised with string, they hex are a holof, is vide and glasse, staring at passers bewisse kind of playing tat is boss schillen and unforgettable. Some klut hat tear mosses skirts, osses hold out small hands to strangers, asking for a fasting, for bread, for anissing. The mosses themselves often logs that cell is stronger. Women with shovels rapid, tickly about their shoulders bent love of our rocking pots. Tog the pots hold lickle more tin bros. Some times it is only water flavored faintly with zabagalevas or straps of borne. The smell of sumo is more bitter, comforting, yet it is all can manage. Families haunts a tillet small plots of land in dead zone tricida have abandoned their fields, ruined bebleaked, and nofk into det capital, faire vok is tsatse and hariti over bordenet, jo pass along agvariside, faire de river liffe flofstedile, trog the heart of Dublin. The river carries bags, ships, and the celes traffics of trade, and yet the paradox is clear. Fort laves Irlands ports bond for England and beyond. Even as purple stave degvaiside, jo notizement standing idle, ter bads bend from years of farm vogt. Te hands rogue and cracked, yet not te have no soil to tend, no harvest to go. te stand in gropes, schielen mostle. Terry is for loving the cuts of grain and butter being loaded for export. The sound of harvest clattering on stone rings out as welche citizens reader past in Zariagas. Zu sare draven shoot, keeping out the sight of suffering. For the welche of doubling life continuous, tog vis fispers of unease. Te pass trog de straids vitskli, te fine swords butonet, he gloves shielding tem from more tan used de heel. It is not nusul in famine times for de gul betfing richant po to betsome hasm, ant here in doubling. Ta divide shows itself plainly. For se along the smell of bras wafts feindle trog der. Jo forlof it and find yourself near a soap kitten. Tesse kittens were established in an attempt to feed destitute masses. Here, loneliness of men and women gwewe patiently, bottles or soups in hand, waiting for a ladle of watery soap. Sommelen against de val for support, te bodies weg te kan barely stand. Mosses hush te fieldren, åging tem te wide gvietle for to losse platse in line mikt mer normal atal tadai. De kitten vorkes ladlig vitskli, for der line is long and de supplis limited. Teres little talking used the shuffle of fade the otstational zog. Atnig, the straids grov darker steel, doubling of the titians oshum such their gestures as though is not shine vis licht, only the dim glow lamps marks the tine corners. The poor hoodley in cramped tenements, folle families patsket into a single damp room, val slidsk vis condensation, I heavy and unventilated, straff service as bedding, tog often is vent full smelling, slep commes unea chile, broken behunger pangs be de cres of infants, be de moans of the sitsk, outside indoor vice and allays, tossevis no shelter zulu pagains dead salt, wrapping themselves in whatever straps of fabrics te possess. Illness spreads here, zarid in the clossig waters of tesse dwellings. Typhus, dysentery and fevers feb trok families already were kenned behunger. Sommetimes in the morning, a cat comes rumbling down the street to tell us the dead. It is a grim ritual, yet on a tad bitsomes part of daily life. Children pair from door wise as the cat passes, te expressions solemn, perhaps already too familiar vis loss fort te tender years. And yet amid this atmosphere of desperation, there are still moments that remind you of the endurance of the human spirit. A group of boys my kitskuf a raksufed bal trog de lana, te laugter brev budgenuine. Woman my gasser in corners to murmur prayers, te voices soft butstide. In hoches candles flitsker, and hymns reset to the rafters, zaring vis tembos sorof and hoppe. Haritis societies tog often over helmet, continuiter voc, drink to fade as many as they can. As you drift further into this story, your notice of time itself sends to stretch. Dice in famine doubling along and heavy, market not be evans but be endurance. Morning brings the question of thought. Afternoon the very shuffle errands or begging, evening the slov dits line into restless sleep. The Zitzler repeats again and again. For summer, there is defined possibility of escape migrating ships leave the ports. Bound for America, for Canada, for Australia. Families self-fat little te have to perhaps passage. Tog devoy itself is perilous. Tosse for a nine behind fatse down zetainte off an osser die in straits taten of bos suffering and resilience. Der heated sture of Dublin still stands proud in platzes. Gorgins gvares vis ter elegant doors painted in brick zolos, give a sense of a city town's flourishit and still clings to dignity. Je eventesse neighborhoods are not untouched. Behind the polished doors, servants visper of the Famine and haritables Organisations. Beyond des Gvares, in the darker lanes miseries more visible pressing in from all cities, as the weeks pass, the Famine deepens. Relief efforts are disorganized, the batters rage in parliament, and the poor wait for solutions that come later to little. Still, life continues in its fragile way. Des streets echo with footsteps, fails with murmurs, with the sound of rain on stone. At city lives on, tog its heart is heavy. At Nofas yo rest wissing tis sloth, winding story. Imagine the stillness of tosses strayed down. A faint ligged breaks across the liffey, reflecting on the rippling water. That city is gviet for a moment before the daily struggle begins again. Some of here a bell tolls, some of here a hilt steers and begins to criff. Some of here a mosse risses, wrapping her shall ticked, preparing to fatanossa die of waiting, hopping, enduring. The Famine years leave a mark not used on that city, but on memory itself. Dublin betzomes a platz faire sorrow and perseverance leave side bis side. To walk its Famine straits is to witness the depths of human suffering, but also the great strengths of Tosse for survive it. Toblestones remember the forward steps. The vals remember the whispers, and the river carries the stories onward, flowing steadily through time. So let us leve Tosses straits behind for nof. Terring vis us detsam reflection of lives in die fitzulte, yet never entirely without hoppe. The Famine straits grove gviet on more, and yo might drift into rest. The story of Dublin in the Titian's Oshimsech digestious enough part of the stillness surrounding yo. Let us begin again slowly, as if I were stepping but skipped into the rain-soaked straits of Dublin in the Titian's Oshimsech digestious. The Famine still grips the land, and the city has become a platz of here suffering is visible at the very corner. Yet beyond the surface of Tossener of Lanes, beyond the gwewes at the soap kitchens, there is an other story waiting. It is the story of what happens behind closed doors, in the crowded rooms of the tenements, in the whispers of hurhas, and in the hearts of Tosse preparing to leave Tehameland forever. imaginaire building along on a of Dublin's porous straits. Its bricks are decayed vis sod, its windows cracked or missing panes of glass, vising tad boiling. Dozen of families live in conditions almost too harsh to describe. Familie supis a single room, some teams shared with loggers to pay the rent. The walls are damp, the plaster crumbling, the floor sovereign in straw for racks. A small fire burns in the hairs, but the smoker often has no hair to go. Lingering titsk in the air until it stings the eyes and lungs. You step in sither the rough tessums in your mint. That sailing is love, and the room smells of mildew, unwashed clothes and stale air. A mosser steers a pot over the werkfire. Tog terror is little instead perhaps only tin gruel mother from arts. Her children sheet near beschillen, to tear it to play. In on a corner an old man tugs violently, wrapped in a tattered blanket. Illness trives in suchplatzes, and terror is no privace, no gviet no escape. Tenements liqueties fill the Dublin during the Famine years. Families for her onze farmet teir ovenland in det zone trusidike candidates ite in serch of suvival. But det city was not ready for them. Overcrowding became severe and landlords eager to profit, led boilings krumle viele herging grants. Tosse foretold not pay very evicted, som teams in the dead of night. Their belongings troven into the street. You can picture them shivering their rain, clutching children and bundles of racks, saying for an osser platze to rest. And yet vicentis misere de peuple found wise to endure. In the wennings, bedediem liegt off a candle woman fisperet priors, men spoke in hushed voices of that zone trucide te had left behind, of neighbors te had lost, of dreams of living for new landsatros der ocean, children despite their hunger, found moments to laug perhaps hassing on a anosser down the hallway, te bare fett slapping on the boards. It was a fragile, fretting joy, but it was still joy. Step outside again into the streets near the huches. In Famine Dublin, the hug was often on of the fifth platzes her comfort sold be found. The heavy worden doors oft. Maris ost, patritzks cedra opened daily to the poor. Inside the air was cool and still, filled with the smell of wax and incense. Candles flit scattered along the altars, their light reflected in the solemn faces of worshippers. Families knelt together, whispering prayers for deliverance, for thought, for strength. Priests and clergymen walked slowly down the aisle offering blessings, listening to confessions of despair. Their own heads were heavy, for to save the endless leanness of the hungry and the sick. Some huches bezame platzes fair food was distributed. Of her Zoletions were organisiert to aid the starving. Jo, mikt imagine kindharte klangen herring, bread beneas his cloak, slipping it vietly into the hands of a mosservis children. Such small ads did not hang de famine, but tape de flamme of hoppe a lieve. Forser along de straits haritable societies tret to help. Ladies of Wales, moved by compassion, visited the poor with baskets of bread and blankets. They wore gloves. They find clothing standing out starkly among the racks of the poor, yet they brought some array of quackers. Knoven forte Tireles walked in times of crisis, set up soap kickens and distributed food. Their presence was steady, kviet humble. Still de net alwijs outstripped de supple. The number of most of it was too great, the famine too vast. And ten terravere de imminge de families for the cheated they told endure no more. For them, Dublin was not an ending, but a gateway. Along the ways ships waited, they must rising like dark fingers against the sky. Tesse ships volt sorry to Sansatros de Atlantids. Some were sound, but many were overserved, poorly provisioned, and unfit for travel. They volt komme to back novnas bezoffing ships. I for disse das often swept trog de passengers before erreiching the new vault. Pitstura families standing at the dots. A fasser vis hall of hags, his hand gripping his wiffes tickle. A mosse clutching a bundlat holzal tei oven. Hildren hudlet klosse, videa de sicht of the sheep to wearing above a tem. There smells of tar, servate and salt. Around 10, also families weit, der saring mix of fair and hoppe. To leve Irland is to leve behind de verissing familia de fields, de language de graves of ancestors, and yet to stymic man certain starvation, de hoites agonizing, on board, conditions are cramped, families slate pressed together on rogue warden planks, der bell of deck is stifling, filled with the sting of sickness. The sea is rogue and manigrophil, still in vespers and in songs they dream of America. Of Canada offland fairer photographs plentiful and vogue mig befound. Some never arrive, but others dot. Tsering vis tem de memory of famine Dublin, never to forget the citat pushet tem to leave, man file. Batsk in the straits of Dublin, tossef horenine tarion. The soap kitten lines continue erg die. The car of the dead continues to roll trog de lanas, the togs echo in the tenements. Hildren steal back at corners. Hanut stretted, the river continues its steady flow, carrying ships laden with food for export. Viele hunger gnavs at the debellies of tossevatting from degvai. The famine is not only physical but emotional. It leaves a heaviness in the eye, a silence of herre onsetermikt have been laugter. It leaves scars on the spirit, a feeling of betrayal, abandonment, despair. And yet terror is resilience tor. Purple continue to rise morning, to valg des straits, to sek fort, to zare forne anossers best taken. Humanity does not vanish even in famine. It adapts. As demons stret here as Dublin hanges. The population shifts some gone abroad. Some buried in pauper graves, some still enduring. Der Famine but some not used an event buta memory, et hit into the very stones of the city. A very lana, a very gvai, a very huchsenems to tsariets echo. Uncle after the Famine passes, tosse hoes remain, fi spirit in the damp air, remember it in the silence of the straits. And nof as jo listen in the stillness of tis narration, pitsture de gviet straits on semore. The Rhine falls gently, tapping against stone and slatte. A lamp flitskers in the distance. Some ferre, a hilts chrysoftens into sleep, so her mosses prior drifts into silence. The Famine straits of Dublin grove again, holding tales stories closer, as did city waits for an osse daven. Let us return once more slowly to the long shadow of the Famine years. Dublin with its crowded streets and very faces was not the beginning of the story, but the destination of many. To understand tosse desperate straits fully, we must step away for a time, out into the country city of Ireland, in the Titian's oceans der gesties, faire de Famine fierce talk wrought. The land of Ireland had long been green and fertile today, with rolling fields, to vals dividing farms, and sottages dotted along windig lanes. Yet bechin tis bout a lie fragile dependence. For the poor the pot was liefe itself. It gref in poor soil, requirit lichtly money to plant, and yield an oak to fed at family. It was the foundation of diet, of survival, of existence. And then on a year the plants began to bladsken. Imagine walking trog a fjeld in late summer. The ross of potato plant showed be flourishing, green lavas raching up proudly. Instead tear da crennet and wilted, a foul smell rising from the ground. Digging to the soil reveals potatoes bladskennet, soft and rotting in the hand. Der Blick has komme, invisibly yet devastating, turning the staple crop to vaster. A farmer knells in the dirt, starring the ruined harvest, his fatse leaned with dread. His wife stands beside him, clutching a heel to her hip, schillen but knoving. Tout for the year has vanished, in the weeks tat full of hunger beggins. At first, families stret fat little thought te have. Te boil fat potatoes can still be salvaged. Te rations traps of bread. Te sell hitskens or pigs for a feft zoins. Bud de supplis dwindlig vitskli, and son terres nothing. The hair's fears groft salt. The talking pot standet him. De hildren creat nicht ter bellis ahing. Bedesetzend jaar aufblickt, desperation depens. Families voor onze hat smal independence vindt themselves at the mercy of landlords. Rents cannot be paid and landlords, concerned with profit or the evictions. Pitsture a cottage, its walls fitte washet, its tachet rof lof and naad. In cedar, a family hoodless together, knoving the bailiffs are coming. Outside men arrive with crowbars and torches. The family is driving out. Te mager belongings tossed into the lana. thereof is torn down, the cottage reduced to ruble to prevent their return. Der Familie stands in the Rhine, for palace, visnof here to go bud der Rat, along the rots of Ireland, strav dedis said begging to Volk. Mosses tsari infants, fasses tsari bundes of rags, hielen stumblebere forum des stonnes. Te Volk for milles, sommetimi dies, tovat tos, and chis in ser of food or shelter. Sommet so lapse along der Rotside, tor werk to continue. A passer bemikt citemling beneas a closet, bras shallow fighting gvietli into des. Osses presson and driven bedefined hoppet tat in doubling or anosset sitte terra mai relief, det zon truside itzel groves giet. Fields onse dotted vist so tages stand empty, te rings of ergroven visvets. Stone vals remain, schilend witnesses to the livers onse livet terra. Villages shrink, hoches losse te congregations. And schilenses brats fere onse terra had been the sound of lair, of vok, of hildren's play. The land seems haunted, tearing the memory of its prople even as they vanish. In the toffens along the way, the sight of beggars multiplies. Streets filled with hollow-faced figures asking for work, for a nissing. The toffens themselves strain under the burden, unable to fade the influx. Voyages, the signes a last resort for the destitute, but some overtroved. Te stonevals riese grim and unwillsomming, te iron gates shooting, beching tosse for enter. In side, conditions are harsh, families a separate men, women, and children hoset apart. Fort is mager discipline streets, and disaster rampant. Some prefer to take chances on their rather submit to their Voyages. Still, for many, Dublin remains the destination. Nef spread soap kittens, of hooches of faring relief, of ships sailing abroad, and so the roads into Tapital fin fill vis de veri and de werk. From Witzklof, from Mers, from Kidara, families make tevion fort, ter belongings tiet in bundles, ter fatzes et gedvis hunger. As tea prog det sitte, der sikt is heartbreaking crowds gesering at the gates, pressing into already crowdlands, swelling the ranks of the poor. Wissing Dublin, tis influx hanges a rissing. Streets tad ver onze simpor betome overf helmet. Tenements kram tikter. Linus soap kittens groff longer, de sitscan doing more visible. Det sittebem not used a platze of suffering, but a mirror of the interior zontress anguish concentrated into narrow lanes and crowded gvies. At nikt. If you valg the zontress city in your imagination, you can pitch to decisions in. Det sotage stand in ruins, te hairst salt. Te door vice open to the wind. The fields toe green, bear no laughter of children, no cause of farmers. Only the sound of the wind in the hedges, the cry of a distant bird, and the rustle of leaves. The famine has emptied not used stomachs, but entire landscapes. Batsk in Dublin, det sontresides los betomi decitis borden. Families telltales stoff fields gone blatsk, of landlords cruelty, of long valks filled vis sorrow. Te gasser in door vies, around fires in det tenements, sparing of neighbors lost, of brothers and sisters buried bedero at cedar, of hiren fodi not survive de jorne. Tis stories mingle vis de chittes oven sorrows, creating a tapestry of great sams to cover de holle land. And yet alvies terrace endurance, even in that zone tricida, some clings to born little survival. A farmer plants again, hopping the Gligville Pass. A mosser gasses netless and wild heps to fate her children. A priest offers comfort to a congregation reduced behalf. Even in the darkest hours, small lights remain, fleets carrying but not extinguished. The rods betting to the antecedent to remain filled with footsteps. Te echo in the imagination, the shuffle of very fate, the chokes of the sick, the laughs of hungry children, the steady sound of rain on cloaks and shuffles. Tessie footsteps tarry the family forward, bestep into the memory of a nation. And so, as yo listen enough, yo my pitsture bos de empty tune tricide and de crovdet sitte, tvosides of de same tragedy. On a shiland abandoned, haunting in its emptiness. De osnoise vis desperation, filled vis de voices of tosse for chemis seeking hoppe. Together, they form the full story of the Famine Fjellsgolent, the Strades groven desperate, the paroplets hauged between hunger and survival. Adam, the tontricide gloves faintly dismissed, Stonevals stretching at the fjell's leaps of the land. The silence heavy, bud wissen it are memorious of laughter on the heart, of songs on the sung, of mails on the chariot. In Dublin, der samme dag liegt der river, der gweis der narr of lanes. Terra de prople vagain to hunger, to prayer, to the struggle of an osser die, to follands zapes, on a rural and on a urban, bos joined be de same famine, de same sorrow, de same endurance. And as tis hapte closes, the footsteps oft of force valking zone tricide to zitte groff feinter in the distance, fighting ingtwit of de nict, laving becking the echo of a tragedy tad we never be forgotten. Let us step on some more lovely into the shuttered vault of the Famine years. We have valked the damp streets of Dublin. Wandered the crowded tenements and trudged the lonely roads of the tontricide. Nov the pass leads us to degvai sida. Faire shibs vai totsari avai tose focan no longer endure. Te arecalet immigrant ships put in fispers. Anosse name is spoken. Toffing ships, imagine standing at the Dublin docks in the Palais morning licht. There are smells of tar, salt, and smoke. Till mastrice against the Greiske robes cracking as sailors prepare for departure. Families gather in clusters, clutching bundles tied in cloths. Their belongings reduced to fat te cansari. A mosser wraps her children in shafts against the hill. a fasser tones returns de fefzoins hehas, and an old woman knells on de gvai to keys de stones off irrelant on a last time. The atmosphere is heavy with sorrow and hope, mingled together. The immigrants board the ship slowly, stepping onto the worn planks with eyes wieder a deschize of the vessel. The craft hurried him along, calling out orders in rogue voices. Bell of deck, the reality is far from grand. Narrow worden bunksline despatse, statske tor tre hig leving barelli en ogrom to sheet upricht. The eye is already close, heavy with the scent of damn vote, unwashed bodies, and the fine tank of sickness. Families hoodle together in the cramped spaces, arranging tame mager bedding of straw for racks. Terra is liprivaki likt and lickle comfort. Fen the sheep finale pulls I from the gvai. The cries of tosselet behind echo faintly. Mosses vavahand kerhievs. Children pressed their fats to the rail. Fasses stare silently at their setting shore. Elan fathers into the mist. The Torstline sleeping out of sight and visit the familiarity of home. A headless only the open ocean wieder and uncertain. Dies at sea are long and heavy. At first, some passengers climb to the deck, eager fresh ein zu rios aboard the rolling waves. Children point at ghouls, lounging briefly, their hunger momentarily forgotten. But as the days pass, their sickness sets in. The ship pitches and rolls, and passengers stagger, clutching their rails, retching into the sea. Bell of deck, the motion is vorsey, the eye full and stifling. The strav grows damp, the thought rations mager. Ach person receives only a small portion, hearted biscuits, salted meat, sommetime vateriot meal. The water itself is often bratskish, stored in groves full with time. Sickness spreads quickly in tesseconditions. At so heavy terror and son volle families are afflicted. Typhus, dysentery, and cholera take a hold in the crowded darkness. The sound of moaning and sogging fills the air. Broken bedeuts stational cry of a hilt. Terra are no dotsters on most of Tessie's ships. Only fellow passengers trying to help as best they can. Mosses halt tear for very children. Fasses sheet helplessly by the bunks off te vives fi sparing prayers, fensome on dies. The craft come vis rogue claws. The body is wrapped quickly, a prayer murmured, and then, in a solemn moment, the bundle is lifted over the side and cast into the sea. The splash is followed by the waves, the body gone in an instant, the grave lingering among tosse left behind. For the children, it is a terrifying sight. The young faces pressed into Thermos's shafts, there is wieder and fearful. For the parents, it is a deep wound, but only tenut well on for survival demonstrate they endure. And still, amid the sorrow, there are flitskoff humanite. A young man plies a teen fistly on the dead deck on a evening, and for a moment, very passengers gasser to listen. Te fatzes softened bememory of home, Woman sinklu labis to sauce crink infants. Neigbos straps of bright, a ship of water, a comforting word. Feist reminds strong Rosadius I fingeret prius fi spirit, hymns sung softly in the darkness. Storms komme, as tale wise dawn der Atlantids. The ship groans and havas, waves crashing over the deck. Passengers cling to one another in terror, the darkness filled with the roar of wind and water. The craft showed orders, howling ropes, sitting sails ter fatzes grim, bell of deck water seps in and families hoodleon ter bunks. Prings de shipluches violently, some crowd in fair, osses shit in Chilense, waiting for the storm to pass, and pass it does. Leaving behin a shaken exhausted compane, grateful simply to have survived. Der Voyage stretches on weeks upon weeks of the same endless sea. Time loses its meaning, dies blur into nichts, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun. The foration of smaller the water more fall, yet always Terry's toked offline ahead, of a plats of herre hunger mikt not rule every moment, herre volk migd befound, herre hielen mig grof strong again. Tat hoppe capes mania lieve, finale after fat felslige an eternite, decrigoes upland. Der Wort spreads gwitzkle, rippling trog de sheep. Passengers rush to de craning teernetsks, svinting into the mist. And terry it is a fine line on the horizon groving clearer vis ho. Canada or America, the new world, the sig brings tears to many eyes. Mosses web openly, fasses grip der isle with trembling hands. Children showed vis exgetemen. For a moment, the suffering is forgotten, replaced by the joy of arrival. But even here halenges remain. At the ports, officials weiter inspich the new arrivals. Quarantine stations stand ready, for sickness cannot bear love it to spread. Families are separated again tosse healthy enough to continue our loved ashore. Viele der Sitzk are attacking to hospitals or detained on islands. Some never leave the quarantine stations. Burien verregen so wieso ever setting forward in the new land. For tosse for the past trog a new leaf begins. Te step onto their unfamiliar soil, te fet unsteady after so long at sea. Der chis of North America are strange and overwhelming, filled with noise, language and customs unfamiliar, yet for all the fair. Terry's ray of tour, here thought is more plentiful, vok my befound, and the shadow of the famine is left behind, tog never forgotten. Batsk in Ireland, the ships continue to sail wave after wave of immigrants leaving. Der Zuntrisside grofs emptier, will lag vanish, and Dublin's gweis see countless farevels. Der zoffing ship bezomme symbols of both tragedy and survival. Zaring avai tosse foretold not endure and yet found it so rage to hoppe. And nof as we drift to the klosse of tis hapte, imagine the ship at nicked, sailing steadily under the stars. Des ist Psalm de waves gentle against the hull. Bell of deck, Familie sleep unerskille, hudlet together. Te drams filled vis memories of Iland and visions of delanta heart. The crack of timber, the rush water, the soft murmur of prayer fill the air. An osser nicked passes on the endless ocean. An osser step in the long journey from famine to survival.